want to thank I want to thank you all.
Someone came up and said to Adam Schiff, who was reading off a prompter, who was trying to stick to the prompter to wrap it up. He went and finished it up. These were people who came in, about 5 or 6 to start with, and said, ceasefire now, ceasefire now. Security ushered them out, and then another couple popped up, let Gaza live, let Gaza live, and then some more came in the middle. Security could not get them out, that they were scattered through the room here at the Avalon Theater and the nightclub. Go down there and pull down in the crowd for me, please. And you see that, there's just a lot of arguing, a lot of disagreement. Again, they were chanting, free Gaza now, let Gaza live, ceasefire now, let Gaza live, and the protesters remain here in the center of this floor. So what was supposed to be a victory celebration and a scripted speech that Adam Schiff was reading off prompter, one no doubt he had carefully crafted a long time ago, was cut dramatically short, and he was now taken off the stage.
All right, guys, so we have to cover the Democrat side of Super Tuesday because we've done enough for talking about the Republican side with Nikki Haley dropping out of the GOP race. Trump now becomes the presumptive nominee, okay? Now, on the Democrat side of things, first and foremost, got to talk about Adam Schiff, okay? As there was a Senate kind of primary election in California, in which Adam Schiff won, but just barely over the Republican challenger, who he actually funded because he wanted to face a Republican in the runoff because he's assuming that he's going to get all of the Democrat votes that didn't go to him. Take a look.
NBC News can project that one of the 2 candidates that will advance to the general election in November will be Adam Schiff, current California congressman, former chair of the Intelligence Committee, major player in Trump impeachments and investigations. Adam Schiff will be in the general election. The question is who will be there with him, by which I mean against him. Congressman Schiff has spent campaign funds and energy and attention trying effectively to elevate Republican Steve Garvey, calculating that there's no chance any Republican can win in a statewide election in California. He'd rather run against a Republican who he's got much stronger differences with than run against fellow Democrats like well-known Democratic members of Congress, Katie Porter and Barbara Lee, who are also in the race.
Yeah, so you seen that, you heard that, okay? Adam Schiff made the calculation that, hey, let me actually fund a Republican so that I can face him in a runoff and maybe I can beat him because I don't have to deal with another Democrat. Again, these guys are very sleazy, okay? They're grimy individuals, okay, these politicians. And that's probably the reason why his victory speech last night got shut down, because you had a lot of pro-Palestinian protesters show up to his victory speech in protest of the Democrats and their policy towards Israel, okay? And the fact that they want the Biden administration to stop Benjamin Netanyahu from running his self-defense operation in Gaza, okay? And that is what the pro-Palestinian protesters are upset about. Now, from the beginning of this situation, I told you guys that this issue would be the Achilles heel of the Democrat Party, okay? Because there's not too many reasons to vote for Joe Biden, okay, unless you have Stockholm Syndrome, which I believe that at least 50% of the Democrat Party definitely has a case of Stockholm Syndrome, because I don't know why anybody would vote for Joe Biden at this point. But there are people who are voting for Joe Biden because we had Super Tuesday last night, and there are people who showed up to vote for Joe Biden. Again, not a lot of people, okay? The turnout wasn't really great, which is a bad sign for Democrats. But what is a worse sign is that the pro-Palestinian protesters, the people who are part of the abandoned Biden camp, the abandoned Biden movement, because they don't want to vote for Joe Biden over this conflict, they've come out and voted in droves lately, okay? Because we first saw in Michigan, where this was tested, over 100,000 people came out and voted uncommitted, okay? Uncommitted in protest of Joe Biden, letting him know that, hey, we're not going to vote for you in November. Okay, or at the very least, it's a warning sign. Now, come Super Tuesday, we had some other interesting results in a few other states. Like, for example, in North Carolina, 13% of the Democrat electorate decided to vote no preference, right? So 13% basically decided, hey, I don't want to choose Joe Biden, right? I want somebody else besides Joe Biden. If you look at states like Tennessee, 8% uncommitted vote. Colorado, 8% uncommitted vote. Alabama, 6%. Iowa, 4%. So you see these uncommitted votes showing up quite a bit. And it is pretty concerning that you have a Democrat primary where in a lot of these states, Joe Biden was the only candidate allowed on the ballot. Okay, like, for example, in North Carolina, they basically rigged it for Joe Biden. You have at least 8 to 15% of the electorate saying, we don't want this guy, right? Like, we don't want to vote for him. Again, that should be extremely concerning. But what's really concerning is that we had the state of Minnesota that has a large Arab American population. They came out and about 20% of the Democrat electorate voted uncommitted over Joe Biden.
President Donald Trump and President Joe Biden swept up nearly every single state this Super Tuesday.
But their opponents are not calling it quits, at least not yet. Here in Minnesota, Trump cruised to an easy victory. Right now, he has 67% of the vote. Pundits thought Nikki Haley may have a shot here. However, at this point, she only has 31%. On the Democratic side, here's the storyline that we're watching. The uncommitted vote is a protest vote against President Joe Biden, and right now it stands at about 20%. More people check that box than for Minnesota Representative Dean Phillips. Our Super Tuesday team coverage begins with that uncommitted vote.
Caroline Cummings is live in Minneapolis, where that protest campaign is having its own watch party. Caroline?
Good evening, Amelia. So Minnesota organizers of the uncommitted movement here say the momentum may have started in Michigan with its presidential primary there last week, but it certainly didn't end there. They say that tonight's turnout far exceeds expectations, and now they hope that President Joe Biden really hears their message loud and clear, and that's been the goal all along. They want the White House to call for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza. Now, that watch party tonight, more than a dozen people showed up to a watch party off of Lake Street in Minneapolis. They watched the results trickle in on a big screen and celebrated each key hurdle they cleared. First, doubling the uncommitted turnout in 2020, which is around 2,600 votes total. Then when they hit 10,000 votes, and then when it was clear that they hit more than 30,000 votes. The group phone banked throughout the last week, door knocked, and showed up to people's apartments to help them get to the polls today. And tonight, they say these results show that their hard work paid off.
I want to send President Biden a very strong message that the way he is handling this is atrocious. He needs to listen to his constituents and the American people. We don't want to see a genocide happening.
How many people are there who want to make a difference and just think that there is no option for them to do so? And this protest vote gave them a way of feeling like they can be a part of something that changes lives and saves human lives.
Now, in 2020, the total turnout for the presidential primary across party lines was nearly 900,000 votes cast. And tonight, as it stands, it looks like that turnout is lagging for this 2024 primary tonight, Amelia.
All right. Thank you, Caroline.
Yeah, so you seen that, you heard that, okay? That is bad news for Joe Biden, okay? That uncommitted vote seems to be strong. It is a real thing, right? That the pro-Palestinian Democrat base is abandoning Joe Biden. Now, here's the thing. All the mainstream liberal media has been talking about is Nikki Haley taking away votes from Trump and the votes for Nikki Haley and what that means. Are the Nikki Haley supporters going to support Trump? And in my last video, I told you guys why Trump shouldn't worry too much about the Nikki Haley voter, right? Only about 15% of the Nikki Haley voter is a voter that Trump should worry about because that voter can be swayed. 50% of Nikki Haley's voters are going to vote for Trump. 35% or so are never Trumpers or Democrats who are not going to vote for Trump no matter what. Okay, so when you look at the Nikki Haley voter, Trump doesn't have to worry too much about trying to get the Nikki Haley voter because Trump has the strongest base out of all the candidates that have decided to run in this presidential season. Okay, so that being said, what you're seeing here is that Trump and his base, the Republican base, is strong. Okay, ultimately, the Republican Party is going to unite behind Trump. However, the same cannot be said for Democrats. Okay, evidenced by the uncommitted vote, evidenced by the low turnout that is happening for the Democrat primary. There's not that much enthusiasm to vote for Joe Biden, and his base is not that strong. This is so apparent that even the mainstream liberal media is admitting that, Trump's base is strong, Biden's is not, and that could spell disaster for Joe Biden going into the general election, which is the opposite of the general narrative that is coming from the mainstream liberal media, which is that Trump should be concerned about the Republican base more so than Biden being concerned about the Democrat Party base. And that's just not true. So let's get into this.
Here, let me call it right up here. Look, over the last few days, we've had 4 national polls come out showing small leads for Donald Trump. But what's interesting,
these are not small leads. Okay, like when you understand how these elections work, Republicans, because of how the electoral college system works, they can win without getting the popular vote. Okay, they don't need the popular vote to win. Okay, so if a Republican is getting 48, 49, 50%, there's a pretty good chance that the Republican will win. However, the Democrats definitely need the popular vote. So when you have polls showing the Republican up +2, +4, it may seem like a small lead. However, when you understand how the electoral college works, that's actually a large lead, right? A Republican winning the popular vote by +4, almost guaranteed win, right? Almost guaranteed victory, right? There's not many scenarios in which a Republican can win the popular vote and still lose, right? That doesn't happen. So again, this lead is larger than what MSNBC is letting on here, right? If Trump wins the popular vote, he's going to win the election, period.
but what's interesting in those polls is you ask Republicans in a Trump-Biden matchup, who are you supporting? And in these polls, here it is, 91-6, 92-5, 96-4. Trump, this is Trump's share with Republicans in general election polling. What did he get among Republicans in 2020? He got 94%. What did he get among Republicans when he won in 2016? He got 92%. His support in the general election polls among Republicans really isn't showing any slack. So again, I think I'm sure there is an issue here with some chunk of Haley's voters who are gettable for Trump. And in a close election, close general election, that can matter a lot. But in the
But like I told you guys, it's a very small amount. It's not as many as the mainstream liberal media is letting on. It's about 15% or so, and it shows up in the numbers. Okay, like, you know, for example, easy math here, okay? If you assume that Trump had 75% support within the party, okay, we talk about Trump versus Nikki Haley, which, again, based off the election results, I believe that's reasonable, okay? That means that Nikki Haley has 25% support. If 50% of Nikki Haley's supporters, or 50 to 60%, I think that's probably more realistically, if 50% of those supporters will vote for Trump, then that puts Trump at this range right here of 90%, right? 90% of people that are going to support him within the party going into the election, the general election, which is right where he has been historically. So again, this hype about, oh, Nikki Haley taking away voters away from Trump and the anti-Trump vote that Nikki Haley is getting is all hype, right? When you actually look at the numbers, Trump's not losing any support within the party, at least not among voters, okay? Because every primary season, voters get a choice of who they prefer, okay? So just because you have some voters that say, hey, I prefer Nikki Haley over Trump, doesn't mean that they're not a Trump voter, right? It doesn't mean that, oh, well, they're just never going to vote for Trump. That's a never Trump vote. That's not true, okay? And we've never made that assumption in a primary until this primary. And that does not come to reality when you look at the numbers, right? I mean, again, in 2016, nobody assumed that, well, all Ted Cruz voters are not going to vote for Trump because they prefer Ted Cruz, and Ted Cruz performed better than Nikki Haley did, right? Ted Cruz did better in 2016 than Nikki Haley did in 2024. All of Ted Cruz voters voted for Trump in the general election. Again, it's amazing how that works. They only make that assumption in 2024 that, oh, well, anybody that voted for Nikki Haley, that's somebody that's not going to vote for Trump. When no, I'm telling you, a majority of those individuals, at least 50% of them are going to vote for Trump. Once you factor that in, you realize that, oh, well, this whole Nikki Haley thing is overhyped. Completely overhyped. The party, 90% is behind Trump. That's a fact, right? And that hasn't changed. Nikki Haley hasn't changed that, okay? Now, again, her 15% of voters that are on the fence, yes, Trump should try to get those voters because those voters will probably be the voters that decide the election. But when you look at Joe Biden and the amount of people coming out to vote uncommitted, that's actually something to be concerned about. That's what the mainstream liberal media really should be talking about. Because those people are telling you, hey, we don't want Joe Biden, right? We rather basically not vote, okay? We rather vote for nobody than this guy.
Context of what we're seeing in the general election, the one who has the issue right now with the base is more Biden than Trump. Because this is from the New York Times poll. They asked folks, hey, you voted for Trump in 2020. Are you still with Donald Trump? 97% of his 2020 voters say they're still with him. Ask Biden's 2020 voters, are you still with Biden? The number is 85% there. So at least right now in the general election polling, it's Trump who's taking more from Biden's voters than Biden who's taking from Trump's voters. So I think there's a bigger context to any of that slack Trump might have from the pro-Haley side of the Republican base. There are gains right now, at least in the polling, that he's making elsewhere that are offsetting whatever is there. I always say the polling doesn't give us answers. It poses and it clarifies questions. And I think these are some of the questions we need to be asking and monitoring over the next few months here, about the voters right now from that Biden 2020 coalition who are now lining up with Trump or not lining up with Biden. What is behind it? Who are they? And does that shift during the course of the campaign?
Yeah, well, here's the thing. We're going to see, because now with Nikki Haley out of the race, we'll see how the polls shift, right? Maybe people will answer the questions differently when it comes to the general election. Now that Nikki is actually out of the race, we will see. But again, these numbers tell a whole different story than what the mainstream liberal media is talking about right now. They're trying to say, well, Trump needs to be worried about Nikki Haley and her voters. No, he doesn't. Those voters are Trump voters. They just prefer Nikki Haley. That doesn't mean they won't vote for Trump. But Joe Biden, on the other hand, he's lost voters, right? He's actually lost people within the Democrat Party base. They're actively protesting this guy. Joe Biden won't campaign on a college campus because he's going to get booed off of campus, right? Straight up. Straight up. You have a sitting Democrat president that can't even campaign on a college campus because the woke college students are going to protest him, right? Again, that is the state of the Democrat Party. Their base is in no position to come out and vote. Like, their far left base. They need the far left base. In 2020, the motivation for the far left to come out was their hatred of Trump. And the progressive promises that Biden was making that he knew he wasn't going to fulfill. But those were the reasons. Now that the far left knows that, okay, this guy Biden is full of ish when it comes to these promises. And you know what? Trump really wasn't all that bad. What reason do they have to come out and vote for Biden? They don't have a reason. This is why Biden and the Democrats are trying their best to do things like illegally forgive student loan debt. This is why they're coming out here now and trying to force a temporary ceasefire, because they know that the writing's on the wall. They know the writing's on the wall. So again, Super Tuesday, I think, was a bad sign for Joe Biden. It's a great sign for Trump. Nikki Haley dropped out. Biden, on the other hand, though, he has the uncommitted vote to worry about, and the fact that he is actively losing support within his own party. Trump is not losing support within his own party, not when it comes to the voters. So, hey, let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.